Everyone. I'm Victor, and yes, my novel Time Villains is the first in a middle grade series and my first novel ever. So Time Villains is really centered around the classic question, if you can invite any three people to dinner, who would you invite? And kind of the follow-up to that is, what if the people that you invited actually showed up at your dinner table? So kind of in its most basic, it's this literary historical mashup. I think the easiest way to describe it is either kind of like a middle grade Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but kind of more representation, responsibility there. Or on the other end, like a literary, historical, very nerdy Ready Player One. So I was excited when Margaret invited me to this because, after I got the invitation, I thought, this book is kind of just propaganda for libraries. But I'll get into that in a second. So I think the genesis of this book kind of came from two things. One was, as a kid, like pretty much everyone on this call, I'm sure, I was super, super into book binges, just reading tons and tons of books. And then on the other side, I was really into action figures, but I like playing with all the action figures together. My brother and I would take all of our, He-Man and Legos and Marvel and Star Wars and all of them, mash them all up and bring all their universes together and have them play together and just come up with these really crazy multiverse spanning adventures. And so when the idea came to kind of have this mechanic, this mechanism where you can invite anybody from history or fiction, I thought, oh, okay, so I could take all of the characters I love from kind of like a lifetime of reading and just nerding out on history, and then I can kind of bring in this like action figure party element where I can just mash them all up together and see what happens. And that's what got me so excited about it. And I think, a couple of years ago when I was designing games and toys for Hasbro, I learned that doing this kind of like action figure party big mashup where you're getting all the multiverses together was something that every kid did. It's one of the most common play patterns there is. And so that kind of gave me extra inspiration and like, oh, this might actually work. So I think another reason that I really wanted to write this book was, I remember way back my original answer to that homework assignment to invite anyone to dinner. And I think my list was like Christopher Columbus, Thomas Edison, and Cortez. And at that point, I was, like a Puerto Rican fresh to the United States. And it's a fairly atrocious list for a Puerto Rican who just moved to the US to have. So part of writing this book, I think, was a reaction to that list, is to trying to kind of, about the curriculum that led me to create a list like that as a kid. So a big focus of this series is trying to really kind of explore characters from a lot of that are way more representative of the world's cultures, the world's history, world's fiction, bring it all in from all different areas, because I think the ultimate hope for this book and for this series is, to kind of be a gateway to other books, to other places, to other characters for them to get into, or maybe an early introduction so that when they read those books further down their life, they resonate. They're like, oh, I remember Captain Ahab. Oh, I remember, Frida Kahlo. And then, of course, I also just had a lot of fun picking my favorite characters from history and fiction for that. Let's see. I think the seed of the story, though, was planted a while ago, probably about 15 years ago. My brother and I were traveling through France. I think it was our first European trip, and we got completely lost. We were somewhere in Western France. It was getting to be nightfall. There wasn't a lot of light left. We were like not freaking out, but kind of wondering where the heck we were. And we ended up stumbling on this forest called, I think it's pronounced Pampon. I don't know. It's Merlin's original forest from, people believe that's where Merlin lived. Is where like a lot of the King Arthur's adventures took place. So we explored it, and it was just such this incredible experience of, running through this forest at night, having stumbled onto it. Like there's legends that the Fountain of Youth was there, and that stayed with me. So many years later, there was this idea of, okay, I love the question, if you can invite any three people to dinner. I think I could like create like a magical table that makes it happen. But there's something very lame about a magical table. Like I just don't think that's like a very interesting thing. And so the idea sat with me for a few months. And then I think my brother and I were reminiscing about this ancient forest. And I thought, wait a second, if we connect those two, then the story starts getting a little bit more interesting. So quickly, Time Villains is about Javi Santiago. He's a Puerto Rican sixth grader. He calls himself a sandwichiste, which is like a cineiste, but for sandwiches. He's doing everything he can not to fail sixth grade. His best friend, Wiki, is this world-weary boy genius. He has this kind of gut punch of a sister called Brady, who's the muscle of their trio. And they live in suburban Maryland, which is a very, very kind of exactly what you'd expect, except they have a castle in the middle of it, and nobody knows why, and that is the school. So their school is called Finisterre. It's this epic castle. It's very odd and mysterious, and it's surrounded by an even more mysterious forest with all sorts of legends around it. Everything else is boring. every year the students at Finisterre are asked to do this homework assignment. If you can invite any 3 people to dinner, who would you invite? They're asked to write about it. They're asked to take pictures of the dinner table with all the little place cards there and what they would serve. And this year, when Javi does it, the characters are summoned. They have this new table. It's this antique, bizarre table they found. The characters are summoned. They show up, and his best friend Wiki pranked him into inviting Blackbeard the pirate. So Blackbeard shows up. He escapes the house. He's wreaking havoc on their town, and they don't know what to do. You know, how do we take on the most nefarious villain in all of history? And that's when they start realizing that the teachers at their school seem very out of place. And so there's Mr. Scrimshaw, who looks like a 200-year-old sailor. There's Senor Q, who's a demented Spanish teacher. There's Mrs. Vlad, who Javi swears is a vampire. And up until that point, Javi didn't make much of it, but kind of as the story continues, you start getting other clues, and a lot of the story is about puzzling out who is who as the clues start falling into place. Anyway, I'll leave you there in terms of the plot. Just to come all the way back to the beginning, I am really excited for the readers to uncover the Easter eggs. I planted a bunch of Easter eggs through the book. I wanted to give the adult readers a chance to have a little fun as they read it. I wanted to give very curious kids something else to puzzle over as they read it. So peppered throughout, a lot of the characters are never named in the book. There is the librarian, one of the main characters. You don't know who he is. The head of libraries actually is one of my favorite authors and a blind librarian who many of you might know. And there's a bunch of other ones. So it might take a little research to uncover them, but I think that's part of the fun. And yeah, and so, you know, coming back to the very beginning, the library propaganda. So I think there's a reason that a lot of reviewers are comparing it to Mr. Lemoncello's library. A lot of the important scenes take place in the library. My favorite character is the librarian, who is never mentioned, but I think would be obvious to all of you. You know, my favorite Easter egg involves that blind head of library at the school. And the library is the heart of the castle. So it's described as this vast wizard's basement, endless shelves, ceilings so high they can't be seen. Most of the most important scenes take place there. Yeah, and I wanted to end this off with something that tied it all together, but then I had a baby, so.